Jay Baba to all. We're here today with Nick Principe and friends. And Nick has a series of programs called Sharing Meher Baba's Kindness, which is such a beautiful title in which he deeply feels and believes. And I'm not sure where you want to start today, Nick. So how about I hand it over to you and you tell us what's on your mind.
Well, I have two things that I'd like to read, short little things. The first, this is from a ghazal written by Baba in the 20s under the pen name of Huma. In hardship and sorrow, be grateful and at peace. In distress, always keep content. Have patience, and at all times be at ease. I keep this on my refrigerator. Many of these have my refrigerator is covered with these handwritten notes because I remember reading from Baba many years ago that the one thing that is under our control is our attitude. That's the only free will we have is our attitude, how we react to something. So that for me is kind of what I try to do. Naturally I don't get there all the time, but I try. The second thing is from the biography that Bao wrote. This is volume 2, page 495. The greatest penance one can do is dance to every whim of the master. Accepting his wish is the highest type of devotion. He used to spend quite a bit of time with Jal, with Baba's brother, and he would always tell me, be resigned to Baba's wish and will. And I think we're all of a certain age. We remember those kind of hand pumps that people used to use to spray uh, fertilizer on plants and things. It was usually metal, had a canister, and you'd kind of pump it like this. And as a matter of fact, there's one, if you ever watched the scene in The Godfather, that with Marlon Brando as he's having a heart attack, he's using one of that thing. And so even a movie like The Godfather can become a form of meditation. As a matter of fact, when people ask me who Baba is, I tell them he's my godfather. That's, the Italians absolutely accept that. They have no question about it. But, Jal, even in letters, because I kept up correspondence with Jal, he would always say, be resigned to Baba's wish and will. And, it was just one of those sentences you hear that you don't think much of it at the time. I didn't, but now the longer I live, the more I realize I'm not in control of anything. So it's just it becomes easier and easier to be resigned to his wish and will, in the sense that there's nothing I can do.
Nick, can we interrupt with questions?
Please, I wish you would.
Two questions in no certain order. One is I'm interested in you actually unpacking more how you explained to strangers who Baba is, and you said the Godfather, and I don't know if that was glib or you really do.
No. I spend a lot of time in the Sisi in Italy.
Yes, I know, because you turned us on to Valeria.
Yeah. So that's kind of where I got into it. because I wear a Baba ring, or I always try to keep a photo of him. Not that many people come to, I rent an apartment there. It's not that many people are there, but they'll see the ring and they'll say, "Who is that?" Actually, about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a Sahavas, and we stayed. I arranged the Sahavas to stay at the Windsor Savoya Hotel, and that's where Baba stayed in the 30s.
We were there.
You were there the
Ah,
month before you did this.
yeah. And so the fellow that his great grandmother is the one who started it, and the fellow that operates it owns it now. There's actually a group of cousins, and when he asked me why I wanted to have this group here, I said my godfather had been here in the 30s, and like I say, in Italy, that's completely acceptable.
But Godfather has a different meaning here than there. What is it? I mean,
Yes and no. I mean, in the Catholic religion, I don't know about the other Christian religions, but the Godfather is, a young man goes through confirmation. I don't know if girls go through confirmation. I grew up with brothers, so I really don't remember. But we went through confirmation, and confirmation is you becoming a man, which means the age of reason, and it corresponds with the Kushti ceremony, which the Zoroastrians do, the Parsis, the sacred thread, because at 7 years old, you're supposed to you're able to learn the difference between right and wrong. And so yeah, it was always that place. It was always very powerful, very powerful. But when of course, for me, I mean, I found out about Baba in the 60s. Baba was still in the body. And, I remember one time I had Baba's photo in my car, an old truck, and the mechanic, I had taken it in for service, and the mechanic looked at the photo and said, "Oh, it looks like Jerry Colonna, who was a comedian." And I really didn't know what to say. Adi was at the center in the mid 70s. I think he had one trip here. And I remember somebody asking him uh, what to say when somebody asks who Baba is. And Adi said, it doesn't matter what you say. He said, you can say he's your brother, your father, your friend. He said, what they're going to hear is what's in your heart. So now, Baba himself, as I understand, I just read this again recently. Baba asked the Mandali, after I'm gone and people are going to come here and they're going to ask, who is Meher Baba? What will you say? And the different Mandali gave different responses. Oh, you're God, or you're the master. And Baba listened to everybody. He said the best response is when they ask you who's Meher Baba, you tell them Meher Baba is that part of you that is asking the question, who is Meher Baba? So these, for me, they're all arrows in my quiver. I don't use the same explanation for everybody.
I never quite understood that response. I'm the person who elicits that question. It almost sounds a little glib.
Well, that's why you have to be careful who you say it to. But that's Baba's words. That's what Baba said we should say. But bear in mind that also wonderful, wonderful adage, you don't cast pearls before swine. So, somebody's got to be prepared to hear that. It's not just something we shout, in a bar over a beer. Matter of fact, as a little aside from that, I spent a lot of time with Kitty. I lived here in the mid-70s when I was in nursing school. And I never heard Kitty say Jai Baba to anybody. And I would sit outside her office in Dilruba, and there was a screen door. And when the weather was nice, the hard door was always open, the screen door was closed. And I would sit there and I would hear these conversations. And it wasn't that I wasn't trying to eavesdrop or pay attention. I just sit there because I knew Baba had been in that house. And in those days, you could just go and sit, and it was fine. Nobody chased you away or anything. But I noticed that when people would leave and they would say Jai Baba, Kitty never responded. She would say, God's name be with you. And one time I asked her, uh, I told her that I had noticed it, and I asked her why she didn't say that. And she said, it's Jai Baba is not a greeting that we should throw around like we say, see you later. It's a very powerful statement. It's Jai Baba's victory to God. That's what Jai means victory, and Baba's the Father. So it's victory to the Father. And when we wish each other Jai Baba, other Baba lovers, we're actually saying, I wish the Baba in you is victorious. You see? So Kitty was always very careful. Now, that being said, I'd leave the Mandali in Merazad and they all be waving and saying Jai Baba. So what all that has done for me is it means we have to give these things a lot of thought and not just do something out of habit. You know, one of the habits that I'm fighting now, you know, I'm sure, well, maybe you know, maybe you don't know, but you know, there's a live camera feed in the tomb. And so allowing for the time difference, about 9:30 at night here, it's time for arti at 7 o'clock in the morning. And sometime in the morning, 8:30, 9:30 again in the morning, you get evening arti. So you can just, I go to YouTube and I click on that and I participate in the arti. But what I'm fighting is what I think is the ritual of every prayer said in a particular order, the song sung in a particular order, and then the repetition of 3 times Avatar Meher Baba KJ. And so for me, um, I'm currently trying to fight that because it reminds me of when I was a youngster going to church and you stood up and sat down because that's what everybody else was doing without any thought, really. So for me personally, um, you know, the only thing that I really take really seriously is I always take my shoes off, my sandals. I'm barefoot. Mani told a story in Mandali Hall one time. It's since been published. Uh, Mani was a child, and she was always very excited when she would get to see Baba. She knew she'd get to see her brother, and she was very spoiled. And she was off school, and I don't know where, I think Baba was in Mehrabad, and she was taken there, and Mani went there, and he was sitting in Mandali Hall, and there were a crowd of people there. And Mani ran up to Baba, and Baba hauled off and slapped her in the face. And Mani said, I heard her tell the story in Mandali Hall. She said, Baba hit me so hard that I still feel the imprint of his fingers on my face. And she was 7, 8, 10 years old, something like that. And she said she didn't want to cry, but she immediately turned and ran to the back of the room. And after a few minutes, one of the Mandali came and said, Baba wants you. And Monty gesturing, she shook her head and stamped her foot, and she's going, no, she's not going. And they went and told Baba, and Baba again sent somebody and said, no, you tell her to come here. And eventually, I think after, it might have been Dr. Goer who told her, you must come, Baba wants you. And when she went up to Baba, Baba embraced her and kissed her and said, nobody approaches me with their sandals on. And that's what Mani had done. She had not taken her sandals off. And for me, that story was so powerful, is that even if I'm by myself in my apartment and I want to have a conversation with Baba, I'm going to say the prayers, I make sure I'm barefoot. Because to me, that's approaching him. And I don't want to approach him in a disrespectful way. So that's just, for me, something I do. I'm not saying, anybody else can feel or do what they want to do, but those are currently the things I'm working on. And they become, I'm relatively handicapped. I don't leave the property much. I'm pretty much, I get out and get in the water and go I do my water exercises in the morning. But from pretty much noontime or 1 o'clock for the rest of the day, I'm here. In my apartment, I don't do anything. I don't go anywhere. So a lot of time to think about these things and try to adjust my life. And as I say, make it a meditation. I hope that answers your questions about what to say when somebody asks about Baba. I don't think we can say anything wrong. Jim Meyer, one of his first albums, one of the most beautiful songs on it is My Real Friend. I have only one friend, many are his forms. He glorifies the sunset, rides above the storm. So, we can just say he's my friend. Adi said, they'll hear what's in your heart.
I know one of the things that he said was, say my name and I'll take care of the rest. And so I've taken, last time I was at Sherry, I bought a purple Baba hat.
Uh-huh.
I passed by, in the past 2 weeks, I've passed by a couple hundred people wearing that hat. And when you see someone with a hat, you say it to yourself, what it is. So I think of how many people have said his name.
It's I love it. I love it. It's sort of like Pete Townsend in The Who. My understanding is that when Baba was in the body, he actually had a photo of Pete on his lap and gestured like this. And how many hundreds of thousands of people have heard about Baba from a singer songwriter. He's done interviews. The first interview I ever read from him about him was in Playboy magazine. Back in the 70s. So yeah, it's anything that we do, uh, you know, um, and of course, a lot depends where you live. This is the Bible Belt here, so I'm very careful. I don't really mention Baba's name much. When I do, I always say, well, that it means compassionate father. I said, you believe in God? And they go, oh yeah, he's the compassionate father. But I don't necessarily say this person is, because as I say, you got to be careful of your audience.
Do you remember where, before I asked you this question, where you were at? Because I had a second question
Yeah,
regarding that.
go ahead.
What?
She doesn't remember.
I don't remember that.
Oh, you don't remember, and you expect me to remember?
I'm expecting to ask you, do you remember what you were talking about?
I'm random.
Was it something about Italy? Because you were talking about Italy.
No, that came after.
Well, Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the
Godfather.
hotel, you were at the hotel, The Godfather,
Yeah.
you were there. I mean, they actually,
Come
it's
back
funny.
to her, don't worry.
Go on.
I walked into a pizza place in Assisi. Uh, and I wear a Baba ring usually when I'm out in public. And I ordered a pizza and I reached over and this young man looked at the ring and he said, "Who's that?" And he was about 20, 21 years old. And I said, "He's my godfather." And he said, "What's his name?" Now, usually people don't ask me that. And I said, "Meher Baba." And then this fellow said, "Is he really God?" So, I didn't see him afterwards. We never had any more conversation. But, I think as Baba, as is said in all the mystical poets, Rumi, Hafiz, when the disciple is ready, the master appears. So part of the reason why it's important to just convey his name, to say his name, even if it's not this birth, it'll, next birth. Adi used to say, "Better luck next birth." If somebody is having some difficulty, he'd say, "Better luck next birth."
Hey, Nick, I have an anecdote I'm reminded
Yeah,
of by this discussion, which is back in probably 1980 or 81. It was probably 81. I went with my wife to Myrtle Beach for her first time at the center. And we were early, so we stopped in at a restaurant for breakfast. And we're sitting at the table, and the the waitress brought us menus, I suppose. And when she walked away, my wife Lisa had a pendant with Baba's picture on it inside of her shirt, and that Mara had given to her maybe just a year ago. So it was pretty new then. Now it's really old, but at that time it was inside, and she decided after the waitress stopped by with the menu to take it out and put it on the outside of her shirt. And I don't know if she had ever done that before, but she felt like she should do it. And when she took it out and the waitress came back to get our orders, she saw it and she said, "Mayor Baba." And then she told us that she had been to the center some years prior and hadn't thought of Baba since then, but it had made an impression upon her. And so somehow, Baba motivated Lisa to reconnect her with him, and of course, his name got mentioned and all that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, anything we can do, uh, something that I do in Myrtle Beach. I have a coin that belonged to Sheriar when he had the toddy place in Pune. He used to collect coins because there were a lot of sailors that would come in there from all over the world. So there were coins from all these different countries. Well, when Sheriar died, the box of coins were bought or brought to Merazad. And Mani told me that uh, she thinks Baba handled all these coins, or at least the box was on his lap or something like that. Anyway, I was able to get one of these coins, and it has a hole in the middle, which was manufactured. I didn't drill the hole. That's how the coin was, with a hole. So I wear that on a chain. And it's amazing the number of people will ask me about that. If they don't ask me about the ring, I just had somebody just a couple of days ago. I think I have nurses and physical therapists who come to visit my apartment here, take care of me. And they asked about this coin And I said, well, it belonged to my grandfather. And they said, oh, who's your grandfather? And I have a picture of Sheriar on the wall. And I said, that's my grandfather. It's my father's father. Bob is my father. So I find that there are ways that we can convey that information. It's not lying. It's just you being careful about the words that we use. So I referred to Baba as my father and Sheriar as my grandfather. And that gives me a way to mention Baba's name, or somehow or other the topic of India comes up. And, they're curious about that. Even if they, I don't get into much of the detail. I used to be a nurse. So, some people, I just tell them, oh, I went to India, I did volunteer work, which I did. I worked with Dr. Goer, and they don't pursue it. But then there are other people who want the details. So for me, it's like fishing. You throw the bait out and you see who you can reel in. And there's lots of different baits you can use depending on the fish you want to catch. But no, that's a great story. I have also, well, my daughter has a collection of things. Mommy had given her. She's got scarves that belong to Mara and Mani. I took her to India when she was 7. Mani gave her a purse that was Mani's when she was 7. So I keep it in my apartment. I've got it locked in a cabinet by my daughter's request. And I love having those things here, but she managed to get a lot of things that were sent her way. Mara sent her barrettes and things like that for her hair, and people will sometimes, when they're in my apartment, as I say, nurses, physical therapists, occupational therapists, they see that stuff there and they want to know, why, because not many people do something like that. Why would you have these things? I have some Duni ash, I have wood shavings from the Samadhi that Mansari gave me. There was a time when the wood door had swollen so much from moisture, and Padre had planed the door down, and Mansari rather had kept every bit of shavings, and she would just give those out. In those days, there was so many of those things available, and so few people. The first time I went to India, there were 6 Westerners. I mean, Mara was giving Baba's hair to people, and all sorts of different things. I know one fellow got cotton that Baba used to put in his ear because he didn't like drafts, and Dr. Goer gave him a little canister, a little bag with those cotton eardrum things in it. So we
Nick, was there a time or was there an event that kind of pushed the button that made you realize that Baba was who he said he was? And therefore he was God to you going forward?
Oh wow. I don't know if I can. I don't know how to answer that. Part of the reason I ended up in Assisi, I've been to Assisi now about 10 times. When I was 10 years old, I wanted to be a Franciscan. I fell in love with St. Francis. And I wanted to be a Franciscan. So, and I remember feeling as a kid how unfortunate I was that I wasn't born in Jesus' time. And that how fortunate those people were, that they were born when Jesus was on the planet. And in those days, of course, I didn't have any concept of the avatar returning or coming before or anything like that. So I and when I found out about Baba, um, nobody told me about Baba. Baba told me about him. I rented a building in Florida. This was in the 60s, about 67, 68. I rented a building on the beach in Cocoa Beach, just south of the Space Center. And there was not a stitch of furniture in there, nothing. There was some built-in permanently fixed mirrors on the walls. There was a built-in bookcase. And there was about a 4x6 little photo of Baba in a frame. It was the only thing that was there that was movable. And the message on it is, I have one message to give age after age, and that is to love God. Shortly after that, long story short, I attempted suicide. And I ended up in the hospital. And I was crying and felt really bad, sorry for myself. And the ER doctor had given me medication to cause me to throw up. And there was a black orderly. In those days, there were orderlies. And he had enormous eyes, and I can still picture this guy's face. And I'm laying on the gurney completely feeling sorry for myself. And this orderly says, son, that's a damn foolish thing you did. And I said, well, you don't understand. He said, what don't I understand? I said, nobody loves me. He said, God loves you. And the minute he said that, I remembered it was a year or so prior to that I saw Baba's photo that said, I have one message to give age after age, and that is to love God. And when he told me that God loves you, it was like the connection was made. And I thought from that moment on, I was going to love Baba and he was going to love me. And everybody else was going to be less. Alaba one time would hold up his hand and he said, you always give Baba 51%. The rest of all your loves, you divide, that's the 49% for everybody else. Baba always gets more than half of your love. So in that sense, I would say that as much as I struggled with it, because I had some unfortunate military experiences, so I've been diagnosed with depression and PTSD, and I had a traumatic brain injury. I have structural problems. But I realized very early on that Bob is in charge. I don't think of him so much as I don't know how to describe it. He's just in charge.
And
He's in
that
charge of
that
everything.
was the question I had. The second question I had was
Yeah.
when you said this, you had made the comment also that you surrender to Baba's wish and his will. Is that how you said it?
Yeah.
How do you know when it's Baba's wish and its will? And for me, sometimes my mind's volume is so loud that I come from the brain, the mind, and I don't know if that shuts down my heart. How did you? I don't.
I think I would suggest, I think you can find that explanation from Baba, the difference between his wish and his will. His will nothing can change his will. His will governs the universe. His wish for us is when we try to please him. He would like for us to do that. It's like a parent, telling your child, I would like for you to do better in school. I would like for you to study a little harder. That to me is sort of equivalent to the parent expressing a wish. But if the parent says, you're not getting a car to drive, that's the will. There's no negotiation. So, and I think it's a dance that we have to do. My first trip to India in the early 70s, and it said there was 6 Westerners there. I was bored to tears. And I don't know if anybody had the opportunity to meet a fellow by the name of Nanakare. Nanakare, when you read the biography, his name will come up. He was a school teacher, and he traveled a lot with Baba in the New Life. And I just read that fairly recently again within the last year. And I had read it before, but I didn't pay much attention to it. But all of a sudden, there's Nanakare, and he's continually showing up. So in the early days, when he retired, he was permitted to live at Mehrabad. So he and Mansari were the only 2 who were doing tomb duty. They would spell each other. So Mansari would go in early in the morning at 6 o'clock or 6:30. Anybody who was there, any pilgrim, Mansari would go in to clean the tomb, the samadhi. And any pilgrim that was there, including me, we'd go there and she'd give you a sponge and a little container of water, and you dip the sponge and we'd get to wash the marble and all the stones on the side, and and the ledges for the windows, because in those days, I mean, I sat on one of those windowsills and read God Speaks. I mean, now you can't do that. It's not permitted anymore. There's too many people. But in those days, we were able to do that. And Nanakare was, they would sit for hours and hours. Mansari, then at some point, Nanakare, he stayed at Lower Mehrabad. Mansari stayed at Upper Mehrabad. She was permitted by Baba. And Kaikobad's daughters, his 2 daughters were living there. Baba had called them the fatties. So these 2 daughters were living there. So there were just the 3 women who lived on the hill by Baba's order or consent. None of the men lived there. They lived down the hill. But at some point in the late morning, Nanakare would come up and relieve Mansari. So Mansari could go to the bathroom, and Westerners we'd go in and she'd make tea and we'd have tea with her. The reason why I'm mentioning all this, just to give you the backdrop, I asked Nanakare one time, I said, how do you deal with the boredom? I was just dumbfounded. They would sit there. When I said there were 6 Westerners, there would be hours that they would, I would walk up the hill sometimes 4 or 5 times in the course of the day. I'd go up, I'd go in the samadhi, I'd, smoking beedies, I'd have a cigarette, I'd go talk to Mansari. If she was away from the tomb, she wouldn't talk if she was at the tomb. And then I'd go back down because I was bored. Then I'd turn around and go back up again a couple hours later. And I asked Nanakare, I said, how do you deal with the boredom? And he said, the cure to boredom is the repetition of Baba's name. So if you want to quiet your mind, the mind cannot think of 2 things at the same time. You cannot say good and bad any more than you can't speak the words together. It comes out garbled. You have to say good, you have to say bad. You can't say good, bad, it doesn't work. And that's what goes on in the mind. The mind can handle 1 thought at a time. So when we're thinking of Baba, which is the cure he gave us, then all the other thoughts become weaker and weaker. But also, and this is one of the advantages of aging, and I'm not talking about 60s or 70s, that's not aging, that's middle age. Aging is 80s and 90s. Because what I'm realizing now is all those things that I was really attached to, they're pretty much all gone. They're gone. I used to smoke. Baba permitted the twins to smoke 5 cigarettes a day. And I used to send the twins cigarettes way back in the 70s. But Baba had told them 5 cigarettes a day. So that's what I adopted. I would smoke 5 cigarettes a day. I was in Italy with my kids, probably 10 years ago. We were in Rome. I was outside waiting for a taxi cab. I lit a cigarette. It tasted like horse shit, and I put it down. And when people said, "Oh, you stopped smoking," I said, "No, I didn't stop smoking. It stopped me. The impressions were gone." So when your impressions are gone, whether it's with people, whether it's with politics, event, whatever, national events, when those impressions are gone, then the brain gets quiet.
Did you have
The
anything
mind
to
gets
do with that? Like what, like praying? Did you want to stop smoking? Had you?
No, no, I just didn't even give it a thought. It was, and since then, I think of it, but it's like thinking about when I used to go to church. I'm not a Catholic, but I grew up a Catholic, so I can remember going to church. And so I remember smoking, but I don't have an opinion about it. What it's also done is it's kept me from being, it's stopping, it's not there yet, because this is a work in progress, but I'm not critical of other people. If somebody else smokes, I can't be critical of them because those are just impressions that they're working out. And it's not for me. And I know this is a bit of an irritant with a lot of Baba people. They hear something about Baba and then they want to use that as an axe on a friend or well, Baba said you shouldn't do this or you shouldn't do. It's no, that's for yourself. You don't use those things that you learn from Baba to criticize other people. It's not ammunition. It's so all of those impressions, whether it's lying, stealing, cheating, sex, greed, whatever it is, the impressions have to be gone. When I was married to a woman for 23 years. When I went to India to tell Bao that we were divorcing, because Bao had stayed with us about 8 or 9 times. So we were very close as a family. And I wanted to tell him in person. And I went to India, took my daughter, we went to India, told him that we were divorcing. He put his arm on my shoulder. He said, "Brother, it's just impressions." He didn't say, "What did she do? What did you do?" It's just impressions. When the impressions are gone, you're finished. Your time is finished. And that's when we die. When the impressions that we have to spend, when they're spent, that's when death comes. That's a natural death.
Nick, there's also the idea of if you see somebody do something, observe somebody doing something that you think is probably bad for them or for somebody else or for you, yet to criticize them for it seems ludicrous when you got to think that you've probably done it perhaps 1,000 or 1,000,000 times over millions of lifetimes that you've had, and now you see that in somebody else. I mean, that
Yeah.
awareness that of that intelligence that Baba provides for us is perfect. It's perfect to become more tolerant.
I agree with you 100%.
Yeah.
And when I think about it too, I never once heard any of the Mandali criticize other people. the closest that I could say I heard somebody criticize somebody. I don't know if any of you had any experience with Rano, Baba's artist. She was sharp, very, very sharp witted. And there was a fellow there, and we're talking about the 70s. He had a very bushy, unkempt beard. His hair was completely unkempt. And Rano looked at him and said, "Don't they have mirrors where you live?" You know, I thought, what a great way to just, instead of saying you look terrible or you need to be groomed or whatever, it's, don't they have mirrors where you live? In other words, and Baba, I believe, had said that one of the best ways to convey information is to put somebody in a questioning mood. So, if you can prompt them in some way like that, but I never once heard Erich ever criticize anybody. I had a very long time, 50-year long Baba friend tell me recently something about my ego. And I said, "You show me one place in the discourses where Baba said we're supposed to work on our egos." There's nothing. There's nothing. Baba explained what it is. But no place did he say you're responsible for eliminating your ego. It's just not there. It's for each individual, and it's not that you eliminate your ego, as is my thought, is that we're replacing it. So you think about Baba, and you're not thinking about yourself. It's just as simple,
There were
and that,
times when I was in India that the Mandali did criticize somebody's actions
yes,
in front of other people. For instance, one time I think my wife was in Mansari's kitchen, and she had her tea, and she was looking at one of the photo albums that she had, and with her cup of tea, and Mansari got really angry because the tea might have spilled on the photos, and so she criticized the thoughtlessness of that, or the irresponsibility, but it didn't reflect on the person, but they did try to correct people. Somebody maybe puts Baba's picture down on the ground near their feet,
yes.
and Mara, she wouldn't be able to bear anything like that, and she would have to say, think of what you're doing, basically to try to get us to be more aware and think like you say, think of Baba instead of uh, being thoughtless.
You see, the Mandali, they were so there was so little of their own personalities there that they had an authority to do that. I think that's not something we should do. Erich called me a pig one time. It was one of the greatest gifts that anybody ever gave me. I was with my wife. We were at the trust office. It might have been the first or second day we were there on our first trip. And my then wife is talking to Mani, and I'm standing next to my wife, and I'm trying to listen to what's going on. And I get distracted because there's something on the bottom of my foot on my sandal.
Bluetooth pairing.
And I look up.
Bluetooth connected.
I look up. I lift my foot up, and I see there's a cigarette butt stuck to my sole of my sandal, and I flip it off with my finger. Erich is just coming out of the office at that time. He sees this, and he says to me, I had met Erich earlier in the morning. He said, "Nick, you pig, how have you been raised?" And I could feel the tears coming down my eyes. I was just mortified. Here it is. I'm just meeting Mani for the first time, and Rano and Adi and all those people, and he's calling me a pig. And then he says to me, "Come with me." And he takes me into the office that he shared with Mani. Mani had a desk on one side, Erich had a desk on the other. and there was a door on the back, and there was a sink there. And he said, wash your hands. And while I'm washing my hands, tears coming out of my eyes, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm in the wrong place. I'm going home. I didn't need to come here to be called a pig. And he's telling me while I'm washing my hands, he said, India is one great big toilet. He said, never touch anything on the bottom of your shoes. He said, people piss and shit and, everywhere and spit. And so don't. Now, a little aside, before going on this trip to India, we were at the center and watched a film of Baba. Baba had was in Mandali Hall at Mirzad. There was a basin, it's I believe still kept there, a basin and a cup. And when Baba wanted to wash his hands, they would fill water in that basin, and then Erich would pour water over Baba's hands, and Baba would, and then Erich, and this is on the film that I'm watching, and Erich would stand there with a towel over his arm. And when Baba finished washing his hands, Erich would bow and he would offer Baba the towel. So now I'm washing my hands and I look at the towel rack and there's no towel there. And I turn and there's Erich with a towel over his arm. And he bends to me, offers me the towel.
That's a gorgeous story. Thank you so much.
And I realized that he and the other Mandali, they saw Baba in everyone, or tried to. They tried to see Baba in everyone. And yeah, that to me, it's what I say, it was one of the best gifts anybody has ever given me.
I got to tell you this one anecdote I heard many years
Yeah.
ago. It was Padre sitting on the veranda at Mandali Hall at Mehrabad, just sitting facing the road, and a rickshaw pulls up, and a fellow gets out of it by himself. I believe this is the description I recall. He was wearing a pair of overalls, no shirt. I don't know if he had shoes on, and it was probably the same guy that you were referring to. Big, bushy red hair and a big beard. And Padre gets up, starts walking because the guy didn't know. It was obvious his first trip. He didn't know exactly where to go, and he was just standing there in the road. Padre walks up to him and says, "Sir, do you think really you think you're going up there looking like this?" And this guy said, "Hey, old man, what do you think you're going to keep me from going to Baba?" And Padre embraced him and said, "Oh, man after my own heart."
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Padre was he was the only one that frightened me because he actually beat a village kid with a cane one time. Who that's why I say the authority that the Mandali had, they didn't abuse it, they didn't show it usually, but they had it. It's a matter of fact in Myrtle Beach. When Elizabeth Baba told Elizabeth that whatever decision she made at the center, he would back her 100%. So I think of that, my the way my imagination plays with the Vatican and the electing popes. So the first pope, Saint Peter, who was of course a disciple, uh, but Elizabeth having the authority, there was no authority to pass it on to other people. So there are other people after Elizabeth's passing who became, the president or whatever they call themselves on the board, but they don't have that authority. That authority resided within those individuals. because, at least to my mind, they are as close to finishing as anybody could be. But they were all a force to be reckoned with. And I consider myself, I'm sorry I missed, some of the others, those that met him. I understand Donkin was incredible. Many of the others, but it wasn't my time. I have to wait. Better luck next birth. Hi, Betty.
How are you, Nick? I'm so sorry
And,
I'm gonna watch the recording. I'm so sorry I missed today.
it's,
Next time.
yeah, the recordings, they'll last a lot longer than I will. They'll be around way past me.
Thank God. Thank
So,
us.
yeah, well, I'm happy to share. And Ron, I appreciate you jumping in because all of us have stories within us. It's it's I think of it sort of like that's my art. And it's sort of like a musician or a singer, songwriter. They're storytellers. And Erich, as wonderful as Erich was in just about every respect as a man, he was also a marvelous storyteller. You watch videos of him, and even he'd just captivate an audience. It's yeah, it was. So I think it's still. I'm so glad the videos of those Mandali exist, so we
Yeah.
can go back and see them.
Erich,
But if you can find
Erich once said that he learned to be a good storyteller from two people, um, Gustaji and Baba, who he interpreted their stories. But he
Yes.
said they were the greatest storytellers. The way they acted it out and all this, and he learned from them as their interpreter.
I've got to
You know-
jump in right now. Excuse me.
Yes.
I've been remiss in watching the time, and I see that we have Alan Ray here and Richard, who I know are here for the program that's coming on, and we have another program starting. And I'm sorry I didn't give warning at the beginning or even just now, but we're pretty much
Okay.
at the close of our
I've
time.
been watching the clock.
Yeah,
I'm fine.
we're all watching the clock. I'm gonna be with them too. We just stop recording for this one and start again for us.
Okay.
Well, till
Next
next time.
awesome.
Baba
Told
bless.
Bob
Thank
to
you
start
very
Much, Nick.
Thank
much,
you.
Nick.
Thank you. Jai
Baba
Baba.
bless. Jai Baba. Yeah.
Jai Baba.
See, how do I get?
I sure hope so.
Hey,